Captain Alan Brooks stared out the viewport of the Earth diplomatic vessel Horizon as it approached the massive ring-shaped space station that housed the Galactic Council. His reflection showed a man in his mid-40s with tired eyes and a square jaw set with determination. The blue and white diplomatic uniform felt stiff against his skin, a reminder that he was here as Earth's representative, not as a military commander. "Nervous, Captain?" First Officer Samantha Miller asked, coming to stand beside him. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun and her expression was concerned but resolute. "Not nervous," Brooks replied. "Just frustrated in advance. They haven't listened to us before. I doubt they'll start now." Miller nodded. "The evidence is stronger this time. They can't ignore Lieutenant Powell's findings forever." Brooks wasn't so sure. Earth had only been granted provisional membership in the Galactic Council 10 years ago, after humans had developed their first faster-than-light drive. In that short time, humanity had earned a reputation for being overly cautious, constantly preparing for threats that the older species dismissed as unlikely. The Horizon docked with a gentle thud, and Brooks gathered his team. Lieutenant Greg Powell, the ship's science officer, clutched his data tablet nervously. At just 29, Powell was brilliant, but inexperienced in diplomatic matters. His discovery might save billions of lives if the Council would only listen. "Remember," Brooks told his team as they prepared to disembark, "no matter what they say, remain calm and professional. We represent all of humanity today." The Galactic Council chamber was enormous, designed to impress and intimidate. 15. Different species were represented, each with their own section. Some delegates floated in special atmosphere tanks, others towered 3 meters tall, and some were so small they needed raised platforms to be seen. Brooks and his team were directed to the small section reserved for provisional members. The human seats were uncomfortable, designed for body types with different proportions. Another subtle reminder of their outsider status. High Minister Zoltak of the Vicari Imperium called the session to order. The Vicari were reptilian, with iridescent scales that shimmered under the chamber lights. Their empire spanned hundreds of star systems, and they had little patience for newcomers like humans. "The Council recognizes the human delegation," Zoltak announced, his voice translated through the universal translator. "Captain Brooks, you have requested emergency time before the full Council. State your purpose." Brooks stood. "Honorable representatives of the Galactic Council, Earth brings urgent information regarding a threat to all civilized worlds." A murmur ran through the chamber. The Duraxians, a gaseous species contained in floating orbs, pulsed with colors that indicated amusement. The Peltari representatives clicked their mandibles in what Brooks had learned was their version of sighing. Brooks continued, 3 months ago, our deep space monitoring stations detected unusual energy patterns in the outer rim. Lieutenant Powell, our science officer, will present our findings." Powell stepped forward, his hands steady despite his obvious nervousness. He activated his data tablet, and a holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber. "The energy signature is moving through space at sublight speeds," Powell explained. "It's massive, spanning the equivalent of a small solar system, and it's consuming everything in its path." The display showed a dark mass moving slowly but deliberately through space. Behind it was emptiness, no stars, no planets, no asteroids, just void. "We've analyzed the patterns," Powell continued, "and they match ancient records we found in the xenoarchaeological database. There are references to a species known as the Devourers. According to these records, they hibernate for 50,000 years, then awaken to feed." The Murn delegate, a feline species known for their historical knowledge, leaned forward. "Those are myths, young human. Stories told to children." "With respect," Powell replied. "The evidence suggests otherwise. The trajectory of this mass will bring it through the most populated regions of Council space within 6 months." High Minister Zoltak's scales darkened with annoyance. "The human delegation brings us stories from ancient times and grainy sensor readings. Is this why you called an emergency session?" Brooks stepped forward again. "We've sent probes to investigate. None have returned, but the last transmissions confirmed our fears. This is real and it's coming. Earth is already preparing defensive measures, but we need a unified response. Defensive measures? The Peltari ambassador's translation came through as alarmed. You're mobilizing your military based on this? We're preparing, Brooks clarified. It's what humans do. It's what cowards do, said a voice from the Jex delegation. The translator couldn't fully convey the contempt in the tone, but the meaning was clear. Brooks felt his face flush, but kept his expression neutral. Humanity's tendency to prepare for worst-case scenarios had earned them the label cowardly among some council races. The older species prided themselves on their measured responses and millennia of peaceful cooperation. They saw humanity's constant readiness for conflict as primitive. The evidence provided by the humans is circumstantial at best, declared High Minister Zoltak. Their primitive sensors likely malfunctioned. This council has maintained peace for 12,000 years without jumping at shadows. Brooks tried again. We're not asking for military action yet. Just send your own science vessels to verify our findings. If we're wrong, you've lost nothing. If we're right, you've gained precious time to prepare. The Galactic Council Overseer, a being of pure energy contained in a specialized suit, spoke for the first time. This body appreciates Earth's concerns. However, diverting resources based on unverified information would cause unnecessary panic. The motion to investigate the human claims is denied. Brooks couldn't believe what he was hearing. You won't even look. Billions of lives could be at stake. The council has spoken, Zoltak said firmly. This session is concluded. As the delegates began to disperse, First Officer Miller leaned toward Brooks. They're not going to listen. Not until it's too late. Brooks nodded grimly. The council races called humans cowardly for their cautious approach to galactic affairs, their insistence on preparation and contingency planning. But Brooks knew the truth. Caution wasn't cowardice. It was wisdom. Lieutenant Powell approached, disappointment clear on his young face. What do we do now, Captain? Brooks looked around the massive chamber, at the delegates chatting casually. As they left, dismissing humanity's warning without a second thought, his decision was already made. We prepare, he said quietly, with or without the Council's blessing. Earth stands alone, then? Miller asked. For now, Brooks replied, but when the Devourers come and the Council realizes we were right all along, we'll be ready to help them too. As they walked back to the horizon, Brooks contacted Earth Defense Command. Admiral Duncan, the Council has rejected our evidence. We're on our own. Admiral Karen Duncan's voice came through clear on the secure channel. I expected as much, Captain. Return to Earth immediately. Operation Sanctuary is already underway. Understood, Brooks replied. We're on our way home. As the Horizon undocked from the Galactic Council station, Brooks watched the massive structure grow smaller in the viewport. The Council races thought humans were cowardly for always preparing for the worst. Soon enough, they would learn that preparation wasn't cowardice. It was survival. And when the time came, humanity would be ready. The Horizon engaged its faster-than-light drive, disappearing into the depths of space, leaving behind a council that was blind to the danger approaching. In 6 months, they would all learn who the truly brave ones were, and Earth would be waiting. 2 months had passed since the Galactic Council dismissed humanity's warnings. Earth had changed dramatically in that short time. What was once a planet focused on expansion and diplomacy had transformed into a fortress, preparing for war. Admiral Karen Duncan stood in the command center beneath the Rocky Mountains, watching as holographic displays showed the progress of humanity's defensive measures. At 53, Duncan had spent her entire adult life in Earth's defense forces. Her gray-streaked hair was cut short for practicality, and her eyes missed nothing as they scanned the data before her. The Minerva defense grid is online, Admiral, reported Commander Jack Nelson from the Mars Command Center. His face on the video feed looked tired but proud. Jupiter's orbital platforms are at 82% capacity. Good work, Commander, Duncan replied. How are the evacuation shelters coming along? We've completed 60% of the planned underground facilities. Nelson said. At current rates, we can house 40% of Earth's population if needed. Duncan nodded. It wasn't enough, but it was better than nothing. When Captain Brooks had returned from the Galactic Council with news of their dismissal, world leaders had been divided on how to respond. Some wanted to try again with the Council, to beg if necessary. Others thought the threat was exaggerated. But President Rivera had made the final decision. Earth would prepare as if its survival depended on it because it very well might. Now the solar system was transforming. Automated factories on the moon worked around the clock, building defensive satellites and weapons platforms. Mars, once home to small scientific outposts, had become a secondary command center and refuge. The asteroid belt had been converted into a minefield that could be activated remotely. "Admiral," called out Lieutenant Lisa Chen from her communication station. "We're receiving a transmission from the Neptune Research Station." "Put it through," Duncan ordered. The holographic display shifted to show Dr. Olivia Wright, head scientist, at the Neptune facility. Behind her, teams of researchers worked frantically at various stations. "Admiral, we've made a breakthrough," Wright announced, her eyes bright with excitement despite the dark circles under them that spoke of too many sleepless nights. "We've been studying the ancient records more carefully, and we think we understand how the Devourers operate." Duncan leaned forward. "Go on, Doctor." "They function almost like a hive mind," Wright explained, pulling up diagrams on a separate screen, "but their communication method leaves them vulnerable to targeted disruption. If we can interfere with their coordination signals, we might be able to confuse them, maybe even turn them against each other." This was the first truly hopeful news in weeks. "How soon can you develop a practical application?" Duncan asked. "We're testing prototypes now," Wright replied. "I'll need more resources to scale up production." "You'll have whatever you need," Duncan promised. "Send the specifications to Commander Nelson on Mars. Their manufacturing facilities can begin immediately." As Wright's image disappeared, Duncan turned to her aide. "Any word from Rodriguez?" Major Ben Harris nodded. "Agent Rodriguez's ship just requested clearance to dock at Lunar Base Alpha. He's bringing in more refugees." Frank Rodriguez was Earth's best intelligence operative. When the Council had ignored humanity's warnings, Rodriguez had taken an unauthorized trip through Council space, making discreet contact with scientists and officials who had taken the human warnings seriously. One by one, he had smuggled these believers back to Earth, aliens who chose to trust humanity's cowardly preparation over their own government's inaction. "How many this time?" Duncan asked. 7, Harris replied, "including an Alpha-Ri physicist who claims to have designed an experimental shield harmonizer that might help against the Devourer's primary weapons." Duncan allowed herself a small smile. "Get that physicist to Dr. Wright immediately." The Admiral walked to the large window overlooking the underground command center. Hundreds of personnel worked at stations, coordinating Earth's transformation into a war machine. On the surface above, civilians were being trained in emergency procedures, stockpiling supplies, and constructing shelters. Some Council species had threatened sanctions against Earth for its provocative military buildup. The Vicari Imperium had even suggested removing humanity's provisional membership altogether. "Major Harris," Duncan called, "pull up the latest deep space imagery." A new hologram appeared, showing the dark mass that Lieutenant Powell had first identified. It had grown larger and its path had become more defined. According to their calculations, it would reach the first inhabited Council world in less than 4 months. "Has there been any change in the Council's position?" Duncan asked. Harris shook his head. "They're still dismissing our warnings as paranoia. Some Council members are using our preparations as evidence that humans are unstable and warlike." AE. Message alert flashed on the main screen. "Incoming transmission from Captain Brooks on the Defender," announced Lieutenant Chen. The newly commissioned Earth Defense Ship Defender was humanity's most advanced warship, built specifically to combat the coming threat. Brooks had been given command after his return from the Council meeting. "Put him through," Duncan ordered. Brooks appeared on screen, standing on the bridge of his new command. "Admiral, we've completed our shakedown cruise. The Defender is fully operational and the fleet is ready for deployment." Excellent timing, Captain, Duncan replied. We've received intelligence that might help us develop effective countermeasures against the Devourers. That's the best news I've heard in months, Brooks said. My crew is ready and eager to prove themselves. I hope that won't be necessary, Duncan said, though they both knew it would be. But we'll be prepared either way. Any word from the Council? Brooks asked, his expression darkening. Nothing useful, Duncan admitted. They're too busy criticizing our preparations to see the threat bearing down on them. Brooks shook his empoigné head. Their arrogance will cost them dearly. Perhaps, Duncan said, but we'll be ready to help them when the time comes, regardless of how they've treated us. As the transmission ended, Duncan turned to address the command center staff. I need hourly updates on the Devourers' movements. The moment they enter a populated system, I want to know. The staff acknowledged her orders and returned to their work with renewed vigor. Duncan checked the time, 20 hours. She had been on duty for 16 hours straight, but sleep would have to wait. There was too much to do. Outside the command center in cities and towns across Earth, families prepared for the worst while hoping for the best. Underground shelters were stocked with supplies. Children practiced evacuation drills. Factories that once produced consumer goods now manufactured components for defense systems. That evening, Duncan addressed the people of Earth via a global broadcast. For generations, she said, looking directly into the camera, the galactic community has called us cautious to a fault. They've mocked our tendency to prepare for threats they consider unlikely. They've called us cowardly for our readiness to face danger. She paused, her expression resolute. Today, that caution may save not only humanity, but the entire galactic community. We prepare not out of fear, but out of wisdom. And when the Devourers come, as we know they will, Earth will stand ready. Not just for ourselves, but for all sentient life in our galaxy. As Duncan's words echoed across the planet, the men and women of Earth continued their preparations. They built defenses, trained fighters, and developed weapons. The Council might call them cowards, but true courage wasn't about ignoring danger. It was about facing it head-on, with clear eyes and steady hands. And humanity was ready to show the galaxy what real courage looked like. The warning alarm blared through the bridge of the Defender as Captain Alan Brooks rushed to his command chair. The ship's lighting had shifted to battle red, casting an eerie glow over the tense faces of his crew. "Report," Brooks ordered, strapping himself in. Lieutenant Greg Powell looked up from his science station, his face pale. "It's happening, sir. The Devourers have entered the Vakari home system." A heavy silence fell over the bridge. The Vakari, the same reptilian species whose High Minister had been most dismissive of humanity's warnings, were about to face the consequences of their arrogance. On screen, Brooks commanded. The main view screen flickered to life, showing a real-time transmission from a human observation probe on the edge of Vakari space. What they saw made even the most seasoned officers catch their breath. Massive bioships, each the size of a small moon, moved slowly but purposefully toward the Vakari homeworld. They were dark, almost shapeless things that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Behind them stretched emptiness where stars and planets had once been. "The Vakari Defense Fleet is moving to intercept," reported Commander Miller from her tactical station. "They've deployed about 200 vessels." Brooks watched as the once proud Vakari military, a force that had dominated this sector of Palm space for thousands of years, moved to engage the Devourers. Their sleek, scaled ships fired energy weapons that should have been capable of destroying small moons. The blast simply disappeared into the dark mass of the nearest Devourer ship. "No effect," Powell said, his voice quiet with horror. "Their weapons aren't even slowing them down." The Devourer's response was swift and terrible. Tendrils of dark energy lashed out, enveloping Vakari ships and simply erasing them. No explosions, no debris, just gone. "We're receiving distress calls from 7 Council worlds simultaneously," reported Communications Officer Heather Campbell, her fingers flying over her console. "The Devourers aren't just attacking the Vakari. They've sent ships to multiple systems." Brooks stood watching the massacre unfold. The Vakari fleet, formidable but unprepared for this specific threat, was being decimated. Within 20 minutes, half their ships were gone. "Admiral Duncan is on Secure Channel 1, Campbell announced. Brooks nodded, and Duncan's face appeared on a secondary screen. "Captain, you're seeing this?" she asked without preamble. "Yes, Admiral. It's worse than we predicted." Duncan's expression was grim. "The Council has gone from dismissing us to begging for help in the space of an hour. They're calling an emergency session." "Will Earth respond?" Brooks asked, already knowing the answer. "We will," Duncan confirmed. "We prepared not just for ourselves but for everyone. Your battle group is closest to the Krell system. Their orbital defenses might hold out until you arrive." The Krell, insectoid engineers who had been particularly vocal about human cowardice, were now facing extinction like the Vakari. "We'll set course immediately," Brooks said. "Captain," Duncan added, her voice softer. "This isn't about saying I told you so. This is about saving lives." "Understood, Admiral." Brooks out. As the transmission ended, Brooks turned to his bridge. "Crew, set course for the Krell system, maximum speed. Alert medical to prepare for casualties. Arm all weapons and deploy Dr. Wright's disruptor shields." The crew sprang into action, their movements precise despite the gravity of their mission. "Captain," Miller said quietly as she worked at her station. "The Krell called us cowards just 3 weeks ago at the trade conference." Brooks nodded. "And today we'll show them what real courage looks like. Engage engines." The Defender and its battle group, 5 ships in total, leaped into faster-than-light travel, racing to reach the Krell before it was too late. The Krell, homeworld, was burning when they arrived. 2 Devourer bioships hovered in orbit, tendrils of energy reaching down to the planet's surface. The Krell orbital platforms, usually bristling with weapons, were dark and silent. A handful of Krell ships fought desperately, but they were being picked off one by one. "Open a channel to any surviving Krell vessels," Brooks ordered. Campbell worked her console. "Channel open, sir." "This is Captain Brooks of Earth Defense Forces," he transmitted. "We stand ready to assist. All civilian vessels, fall back behind our defensive line." There was a moment of silence, then a chittering response came through. The translator. "Humans, you came to help us? After how we treated you." "That's not important now," Brooks replied. "Move your civilian ships to these coordinates. We'll cover you." The human battle group moved into formation, placing themselves between the Devourers and the remaining Krell ships. "Deploy shield harmonizers," Brooks ordered. The technology developed by Dr. Wright's team, with crucial assistance from the Alfari, physicist who had defected to Earth, came online. A shimmering field surrounded the human ships. "Devourers are turning to engage," Miller reported. "They're firing their disintegration beams." Everyone on the bridge held their breath as the dark energy rushed toward them, only to disperse harmlessly against the shield harmonizers. "Shields holding," Miller announced, unable to keep the triumph from her voice. "The harmonizers are working exactly as Dr. Wright predicted." "Target the neural clusters," Brooks ordered. "Use Lieutenant Powell's targeting algorithms. Human weapons, designed specifically for this encounter, fired in a coordinated pattern. The energy pulses penetrated the Devourer's outer layers, striking the critical points Powell had identified based on his research. The effect was immediate. The nearest Devourer ship writhed in space, its coordinated movements becoming erratic. Its tendrils lashed out wildly, some even striking its companion. "It's working," Powell said, his eyes wide. "The neural disruption is breaking down their hive-mind connection." The battle was far from easy. The Devourers, even in disarray, were immensely powerful. One human destroyer, the Valiant, was caught by a flailing tendril and torn apart. The crew of the light cruiser Sentinel sacrificed themselves to protect a Krell transport packed with civilians, positioning their ship to absorb a killing blow. But after 3 hours of intense fighting, the Devourers retreated, leaving behind a devastated but not destroyed Krell homeworld. "Casualty reports coming in," Campbell said, her voice tight with emotion. "We lost the Valiant and the Sentinel. The protector is heavily damaged but stable. Brooks closed his eyes briefly, feeling the weight of those lost lives. Begin rescue. Operations. I want every survivor we can find brought aboard, Krell and human alike. As the human ships moved to assist the Krell, a transmission came through from the planet's surface. The Krell Chancellor, recognizable by the elaborate patterns on his carapace, appeared on screen. Captain Brooks, the Chancellor chittered, mandibles clicking in their species' expression of shame. We called you cowards, yet you alone prepared. You alone came to our aid when we needed it most. Brooks nodded in acknowledgement. We all face the same enemy, Chancellor. And this is just the beginning. The Krell stand with humanity now, the Chancellor declared. Direct us, and we will follow. As Brooks organized the evacuation of critical Krell personnel and civilians, reports flooded in from across Council space. The Devourers had struck a dozen systems simultaneously. Some were already lost completely. Others, like the Krell, were hanging on by a thread. In all cases, the only effective resistance was coming from human ships, using the technology and tactics that Earth had developed during its months of preparation. The Galactic Council, what remained of it, was convening aboard the massive Earth carrier Resilience, now the only secure meeting place left. As the Defender finished its rescue operations, Brooks received new orders from Admiral Duncan. Return to Earth. The real fight is just beginning. Looking out at the devastated Krell system, once a jewel of the Galactic Council, Brooks knew that humanity's so-called cowardice had saved countless lives today, and they were just getting started. The massive Earth carrier Resilience had never been designed to host the Galactic Council. Yet here they were, representatives of 12 surviving species gathered in what had once been the ship's main hangar bay, now hastily converted into a meeting chamber. Admiral Karen Duncan stood before them, her uniform crisp despite the 36 hours she had been awake. Behind her, a holographic display showed the current positions of the Devourer forces across the galaxy. The Devourers can be defeated, she stated firmly to the chamber filled with representatives of the surviving council races. Their neural network has 13 primary nodes. We've identified 8 so far. High Minister Zoltak of the Vakari was present, one of the few leaders of his species to escape their homeworld. His normally bright scales had dulled to a muted gray, a sign of deep distress among his kind. Admiral Duncan, Zoltak said, his voice lacking its usual arrogance. We should have heeded your warnings. The cost of our arrogance cannot be measured. Duncan nodded but did not dwell on the past. What matters now is our response. Earth's defense grid successfully repelled the first wave that approached our system. Dr. Wright's disruption protocol prevented their typical coordinated assault. How? Asked the Duraxian representative, their gaseous form swirling anxiously in its containment sphere. Duncan gestured to Dr. Olivia Wright, who stepped forward. Despite the crisis, Wright maintained a calm demeanor as she addressed the council. The Devourers operate as a hive mind, Wright explained, but not a simple one. They use quantum entanglement to communicate across vast distances. Our disruptors create false signals in their network, essentially giving them conflicting commands. The Peltari representative clicked its mandibles. And this technology can be adapted to our ships? It already has been, Commander Jack Nelson replied from his position beside Duncan. The schematics have been transmitted to all Allied forces. Engineers from the Krell and Alfari are already helping to modify your remaining vessels. This is not a human victory, Duncan added firmly. This is the beginning of a unified defense. We have the tools to fight back, but we need every ship, every scientist, and every resource you can spare. For the first time in 12,000 years, the Galactic Council found itself looking to the youngest, most primitive species for leadership. The irony was not lost on anyone present. The Council Premier, a Mr. Arn whose homeworld was now under siege, stood on 4 legs. By unanimous consent, the emergency protocols are activated. Admiral Duncan, the combined forces of the Galactic Alliance are at your disposal. Duncan bowed slightly. I accept this responsibility. Commander Nelson will coordinate with your military commanders. Dr. Wright will lead the scientific teams, and I'm assigning Agent Rodriguez to head a special operations unit. Frank Rodriguez, who had been standing quietly at the back of the room, stepped forward. The intelligence agent looked uncomfortable in the spotlight but nodded his acceptance. We need to strike at the Devourer's central neural nodes, Duncan continued. Agent Rodriguez will lead teams to plant disruptors at these locations. A map appeared showing 13 points spread across the galaxy. 8 were marked clearly, 5 remained as estimates. This will not be easy, Duncan warned. But humanity did not prepare only to save itself. We prepared to save everyone. Over the next 3 months, a new alliance formed under human strategic command. Species that had competed for millennia now worked together, applying Earth defensive preparations on a galactic scale. Captain Alan Brooks, now commanding a joint fleet of human and alien vessels, led the defense of critical systems. The Defender had become a symbol of hope, a ship that had never lost a battle against the Devourers. On the bridge of the Defender, Brooks studied the tactical display as his mixed crew worked smoothly together. Lieutenant Powell now had a team of alien scientists working under him, refining the targeting algorithms with each engagement. Captain, called Communications Officer Campbell, Admiral Duncan is requesting a status update. Brooks nodded, and Duncan's face appeared on the main screen. Admiral, the Proxima defensive line is holding. The Krell engineers have improved our shield harmonizers. We're seeing 30% better efficiency. Good work, Captain, Duncan replied. We've located the remaining neural nodes. Agent Rodriguez is preparing for the final operation. Brooks straightened. The Defender stands ready to support. I know, Duncan said with a slight smile. That's why I'm assigning you to lead the main fleet during the operation. Rodriguez and his team will need the best cover we can provide. 2 weeks later, the final battle took place in deep space, near the ancient hibernation site of the Devourers, a massive void where stars had been consumed eons ago to fuel their long sleep. The combined fleet, led by the Defender, engaged the main Devourer force. Ships from a dozen species fought side by side using human tactics and technology integrated with their own. Meanwhile, Agent Rodriguez led a special operations team in 5 small, stealthy vessels. His team included specialists from 7 species, each chosen for their unique skills. Their mission: plant disruptors at the 5 remaining neural nodes while the fleet drew the Devourer's attention. Remember, Rodriguez told his team as they approached the first target, synchronization is everything. All 5 disruptors must activate within 60 seconds of each other. The Alpha-Re physicist whose shield harmonizer design had saved countless lives nodded. The timing circuits are linked. Once in place, they will coordinate automatically. Rodriguez's team moved silently through the darkness of space, their ships using technology borrowed from the Peltari to remain virtually invisible. Back in the main battle, Brooks watched as his fleet held the line against overwhelming numbers. The Defender shook as it absorbed another hit. Shields at 42%, Miller reported. We can't take much more of this. We hold until Rodriguez gives the signal, Brooks said firmly. Not 1 second less. Dr. Wright, monitoring from the science vessel Discovery, worked frantically with her team to track the neural patterns of the Devourer hive mind. Something's happening, she reported excitedly. The first disruptor is active. The pattern is starting to destabilize. One by one, Rodriguez's team planted their devices. The operation wasn't without cost. 2 of the stealth ships were discovered and destroyed, but the survivors pressed on. Final disruptor in place. Rodriguez's voice came through, strained, but triumphant. Activating in 3, 2, 1. Across the battlefield, the effect was immediate and dramatic. The Devourer ships, once moving with terrifying coordination, began to twitch and jerk erratically. Some turned on each other, tendrils of energy lashing out at their own kind. The hive mind is fragmenting, Wright confirmed. The disruptors are working. Brooks ordered an all-out attack on the confused enemy. The Allied fleet pressed forward, targeting the now vulnerable neural clusters with surgical precision. It took 6 more hours of fighting, but in the end, the Devourers were neutralized, their hive mind shattered beyond repair, their individual components unable to function alone. 1 month later, the surviving council races gathered on Earth, the first council meeting ever held on human soil. The Great Hall in Geneva had been adapted for species of all shapes and sizes, a symbol of the new understanding between the once divided peoples of the galaxy. The new council premier, a Krell who had fought alongside humans during the war, addressed the assembly. Humanity's caution was never cowardice, the premier acknowledged, mandibles clicking in a pattern that the translator rendered as deep respect. It was wisdom we lacked. From this day forward, humanity's voice will never again be dismissed. Admiral Duncan, standing beside Captain Brooks and the other heroes of what was now being called the Devourer War, stepped forward to sign the new galactic charter. The document formalized Earth's full membership in the Council and established new protocols for threat assessment, protocols based on humanity's approach to preparation and readiness. We did not win this war alone, Duncan reminded everyone present. We won it together by combining our strengths. As the ceremony concluded, Brooks found himself approached by High Minister Zoltak. The Vakari leader's scales had regained some of their luster, though his homeworld remained largely in ruins. Captain, Zoltak said quietly, I was among the loudest voices calling your people cowards. Brooks shook his head. That's in the past, Minister. Perhaps, Zoltak agreed, but I will ensure that the history books of my people record the truth, that when all seemed lost it was the humans, the species we mocked for their caution, who saved us all. In the years that followed, humanity led the recovery effort, helping displaced species rebuild. The galaxy learned a valuable lesson. Sometimes, those who prepare for the worst aren't acting out of fear. They're demonstrating the highest form of courage. The courage to face reality, to plan ahead, and to stand ready when others would rather look away. And if some still called humans cowardly for their careful ways, no one minded anymore. After all, they had proven everyone wrong when it mattered most. The end.